Hi, welcome to my channel today. This is the artist Kelly Borsheim. I sculpt and I paint. And in today's video, I'm going to show you day one of the painting of a new work called Morning Glories in Portugal. Okay, so the story behind this canvas is that I had put a campitura on it, a solid color of sort of a lavender color. And I had painted a much larger canvas thinking that I would do a composition of a plant that I thought would be interesting and sort of a meditative piece. But in the process of working on other projects, I had too much stuff going on, and I was moving things around in my studio, and this canvas fell, and it tore an L-shaped hole into the canvas. It ripped it. So I cut off the part that I can. I'm going to use the other half of it for something else. It's a much narrower strip. But anyway, it has a campitura of this lavender color. And then I took just the regular kid chalk, just a white chalk, using my photo reference that you see here. I sketched in the basic shapes of the drawing. Now, one thing I know is that the proportion of the printout that I made on an A4, 11 by 8.5 by 11 size paper, just a normal printout, is much smaller than my original, which I like because that keeps me drawing and it does not keep me copying or tracing or anything like that. I like that. But also I know that my original reference image is not to the same proportion as the canvas I'm painting on, and I'm okay with that. So when I was drawing my shapes, I was very conscious of not putting things where they fell in the center of the painting because I didn't want to block the action. So you'll see that how I tried to do that. And to be fair, I really like the reference photo that I took long enough that I took this on a trip with my brother Steve and his daughter in 2018. And it's 2025 now, so that means that I like this picture enough that I kept it in my reference stuff, and even years later I still thought that would make a nice painting. So I'm working on it. Now, I was going to ask you, have you ever had a problem with your computer where it's really, really, really slow? And even though it would be the smart thing to do is drive into town, leave it at the computer repair guy, have him find the virus or whatever it is that's slowing it down, and you lose maybe a day or two, but you save so much more in the long run. Well, I'm not that smart. I don't like going into town. I like staying at home and working, and I like doing my stuff. But so I've been doing different things to try to minimize what could be wrong with my computer, because I tend to abuse them, frankly. But because I was trying to get things done, and I didn't feel like I had time to go to the store and leave my computer, and I'm a little bit nervous about doing that anyway, I decided I'm going to move this painting into this room, and when the computer's stuck, I'm going to work on it a little bit. So that's what got me started on it. But then, once you get painting, then I forget that I'm working on the computer, which is fine. Okay, so what you see me doing now is I chose my palette, meaning that I wanted a very limited color, group of colors. So I have a blue, obviously I have the purple that's already there. And then I have all these greens. So I chose a light green and I chose a dark green to start off with. I'm not yet worried about the bougainvillea that's on the top part of the building on the balconies, but right now I just want to start the painting. Now the lavender, reminds me. This is an interesting thing about photography. When I take a picture of that lavender background, it comes out looking really bluish purpley. But it's not really blue purple. It's actually a nice warm purple. So on my Sony, I took a picture of light, the regular one, the way the camera interprets the colors. And I also have a little thing on it. I can dial up a warm color. So I did that and dialed up the warm color. So when you see the colors change in this video between cold and warm, it's exactly having to do with the computer. I mean, how the camera interprets color. Okay, it probably doesn't help that I have this on an orange wall in the background because that makes the purple feel more purpley blue kind of thing, contrast to that. So anyway, that's enough with the technicalities. Now, what you see that I'm doing right here is that I started off with a dark green because I have a mid-tone campitura, which is the field color I painted the entire canvas on. It's my starting color. Instead of white, I chose lavender. And I want to add the darks and the lights, but then I kind of got caught up with wanting to play with these flowers and see if I enjoyed painting flowers, because I don't do that so often really. So this is what I'm doing here but you'll see as I'm adding the blues, I also go in and add some white in there and start already defining the tones. Now, if you're starting out painting, I don't recommend doing this, but what I'm doing, because I've been painting for many, many years now, is I'm combining a lot of steps at once. You always start off with the shapes. Well, you don't always have to do anything. My shapes are actually line drawings, but they're very, very loose at this stage because all I'm trying to do is get an idea of the placement of where the flowers are. And if I did the flowers in a relationship that I like, I want to say, because I'm not going to copy exactly the photo. I'm using it as a strong reference, but I'm not going to copy exactly. So once I get those laid out, well, then the green kind of falls into place, you know. So also, you'll see that in this process, I'm changing some of the leaves a little bit as I change the proportion of the piece and just try to get more variety is my goal. But I'm also trying to get, I want some of this purple showing through. So as I'm laying in these things, I'm not doing a solid coloring of the shape of a morning glory, for example. Okay, I'm trying to be very blotchy. I'm trying to be very loose. And I also know that I'm going to be painting in many, many layers. So that means that I don't have to get things right the first time. In fact, one of the things that I'm exploring lately is not getting the color right on the first time, so that in the subsequent layers, you end up having a very dynamic, multicolored kind of thing going on. And it's something you can't do in one pass. You've got to do it in layers. So that's what I'm working on. Okay, so I sped this video up so that it's 2 times the fastness. It's 2 times faster than the regular video. Let me put it that way. I'm losing my speaking skills, can you tell? If I ever had any. And my voice is really froggy today. I'm not sure why. Anyway, you know the old saying about watching paint dry and how much fun that is. So I'm hoping that applying paint is a different endeavor. But even so, I thought if I sped it up 2 times, you're not really losing it a lot if you're trying to figure out what I'm painting, how I'm painting, what I choose to paint first. And again, these are not set in stone rules. I might try a different painting and try a different procedure. I might have started with the top half of the painting, but I tend to start with the subject first, the part that interested me the most. And also, I try to put the energy in it at the beginning, because if I don't have the energy, it's really hard to get it back later. It's hard to turn a boring. It's easy to destroy an interesting painting and make it boring, but I think it might be even more difficult to take a boring painting and make it interesting. But I could be wrong, because in the end, everyone's brain works in different ways. And so it's one thing that I want to show you how I paint, but really, the only thing that's going to help you is do your own painting in your own way, figure out your own answers for things when you get stuck. Go ahead and watch other people, because maybe they had a similar problem, or maybe they've got a problem that you'll have in the future. But I tend to balance things out a little bit. I like going to museums and I love seeing other artists work, but there's a point in which I don't want to do it anymore. And that's because I have seen far too often too many students study with an artist and start painting exactly like the artist. I never wanted to do that. So I'm totally happy having my art look like maybe a mixture of this inspiration or that inspiration. But in the end, the way that I combine all of those inspirations or techniques or cropping decisions or all of that stuff, that's going to be something that only I have done in my way. You're going to do it in your own way. And that's important, and that's enjoyable, and that's a wonderful thing. So don't give up on that. But Anyway, so you see what I've done here is I've started getting a little bit bored with the blue. Not bored with the blue, but what I mean is I want to develop the painting so that I understand a little bit more. So you saw that I started adding some lights in there, and a large part of that is because blue, this particular blue and that particular lavender are very similar in tone. And that means that I'm not getting the dramatic difference that I tend to shoot for. So that's an important thing to me. And also, I'm sometimes afraid I'm going to lose my place. So I want to have some of that in there. But you'll also see that as I'm developing the flowers, the Morning Glories, they're blue, I want to put in some of those whites and pinks that are in the center part of the flower. It not only is a place marker for me, but it makes the art more interesting for me to see the contrast right away. You'll notice too that if you look at the greens, I am using both the light green and the dark green as I go along, instead of just filling all the dark green areas and then filling all the light green areas. And I hope you can see I'm also trying to leave those little bits of purple every once in a while, okay? All right, so one thing I wanted to explain about the chalk is that I just did a community mural with a little village in Italy, in Tuscany. And it was really fun because I was teaching them how to transfer a design in that so that they could they made their own choices when they did this project. It was really fun. I'm showing you my color palette now. So I used white chalk because it's easy to see against a lavender background, okay? If I had a really light background, like a white canvas, I would probably use charcoal, or if I didn't want to mix a green, muddy green into the paint, I would choose probably a colored chalk, but it would have to be a chalk that's dark enough that I could see it against the white background easily. And I don't know if you can see the chalk in the background. I think you can, but I can at least see it from where I'm standing. But if you use a color or a tone, actually is the more important word. It's the light or the darkness of it that's important. That is too close to the background color, then you don't see it, and then you end up having a struggle. So the problem with a lot of kid chalks is that all the colors are bright. So you may have a blue or a pink or a purple or yellow or whatever, but they're going to be quite light in background. So I'm lucky because I painted the background dark. Now, this is acrylic painting, this one, and so it really doesn't matter so much what I do, because I could always have started with a white canvas and then dabbled in bits and pieces of purple everywhere, because it's not like an oil painting, where in oil painting you're going to see all the layers eventually because oil paint gets transparent over the time. But anyway, the nice thing about chalk is that if you are painting and you redesign the shapes a little bit, you can let the acrylic dry, and then if you want, you can take a damp washcloth and then wipe away all the chalk. But usually I find that the chalk doesn't bother me at all, because as soon as you put the paint into it and brush it in, it mixes in with the paint, and it's really something so inert that I've never heard anybody talk about that actually harming any painting to do. So there's the technical of that. If you have any questions, please put them down below. And if you like this kind of video, please put the like, subscribe to my channel if you feel so moved, and hit the notification bell if you would like to, not hit it, but press it. If you'd like to get notified when you're logged into YouTube to hear about new videos that I have posted, okay? I don't do what I'm supposed to do, and that's typical of many subjects, but right now I'm speaking about that I don't post regularly on YouTube because my life is not a normal kind of life sort of thing. And sometimes I get very wrapped up in the selling part of the business, or a friend needs some help, or I'm trying to balance out having a life with people in it, that kind of thing. So I don't always get to paint every day, and that's a mistake I think that I shouldn't be making, but I can't seem to get my brain to do things on a schedule, a normal thing. So a lot of times if I need to go see someone in the daytime, that's my work time, but certain things need to be done at certain times. And so I tend to work until 3 or 4 in the morning, because that's the time where everybody else in the world is sleeping and nobody's going to bother me, likely. So anyway, that's that. But yes, please leave your questions and comments below, and I'll do my best to answer all of that. I do try to, but I'm not so well known, I guess, that that I get a whole lot of questions. So anyway, okay, so as I'm painting this, you can see now I'm adding in the lighter tones and I'm refining the shapes. Now again, I don't want that much white outlining these Morning Glories, but I also know that I put in the line where I want it, and then I can soften it either with my finger, pulling it into the form. The edges are going to be sharp on the edges of a form, and usually where the form overlaps covers up part of the form behind it. And when I say form, I'm saying that because you really want to think in abstract terms of what's the shape, not think about a label of what it is. You're not drawing a pear, you're drawing a shape that's round, but rounder on one end and then tapering down in a triangle sort of thing. But, it's an exercise that we learn in the classical art schools, that if you're drawing something, instead of saying, oh, this is the shape of that particular flower at in a certain angle or so, try to make it look like a fish, not look like, but I mean, try to imagine in your mind it's something else, an object, if you like, instead of what you're actually painting. Because it's crazy sounding, but sometimes the label that's in our brain does not allow us to draw things in perspective, for example, if it's turned a certain way, because it messes up with your head. So you have this little dialogue going on between your left and your right brains about spatial thinking and versus labeling, and sometimes it doesn't work in your favor. Okay, so at this point you can see that, sure, I haven't painted all the flowers or the grass, but what happened is my brain wants to see the rest of this painting. And I got tired of the purples, blues, and greens, and I say that loosely because those are my favorite colors, and I love those. But I really had this feeling that it was lacking something, and I don't want to have a feeling like that so early in the morning. Now, look at where I put this roof here. It's almost halfway through the canvas, except that, remember that I've cut the canvas, so on the right side, part of that canvas is going to be folded around a stretcher bar. So you see how I've also lengthened that roof now. So anyway, that's something I wanted to point out to you, that I am thinking about a lot of things while I'm putting this stuff in, mostly relationships at this point. But I'm also thinking about color and tone, and like I said, I'm combining those steps, because normally you would try to think of your shapes first, and then maybe you would do a no-tan design. No-tan means put in your darks and put in your lights, a two-tone thing, so that you understand how you've organized your shapes, and you can see much easier at that point if the arrangement of the lights and darks is something that interests you. And another thing you can do if you want to check this is rotate your canvas 90 degrees or 180 degrees, whatever you want, and see if those shapes still appeal to you. Because technically for an abstract work, which is how you start a realistic work actually, is those things should be appealing regardless of how they're oriented, okay? You're looking for giant shapes changing with smaller shapes. You want staccato type shapes. I'm talking a little bit of music terms now, but you want smaller points to break up the larger points, but you want the larger points to give the brain a place to rest and that kind of thing. So these are all these sort of things that you can do to give surprise elements, but also you want enough of the regular, expected, repeated shapes to give the brain a comfortable place. So it's the rock and roll that interests things, and mixing it up a little bit. So those are all kind of things that they kind of come a little bit naturally to you once you've done a lot of paintings and sculpture and consciously trying to work these things out. And, it looks like I'm just kind of copying the photo and I'm looking at the photo and I'm painting, but there are so many things that are going on in my brain, and so many things that even though I've been painting for many decades now, I still kind of go back and do some, some of it's become autopilot, but it's not really. It's still actually in the front of my brain to do that. So I don't know how to explain it, but everything is true. You just have to figure out when to use it, when it best serves you. So I put the light in because I wanted to start developing the other shapes. And then I got sidetracked thinking, well, how high do I want this green to go? Do I want to go higher than the reference? Maybe. Do I want to do it this or... So also what's happening is, if I tell you a little secret, acrylic paint dries pretty quickly. So a lot of times I find myself being cheap with the paint. And what that means is, a lot of times, instead of doing what I want to do with the color, I'm going to use up the color that's in my palette, on the palette, already out of the jar before it dries up. And that's what I'm doing here with the greens, I think. Because I know I still have to paint greens anyway. So why should I let that paint just dry and have to be thrown away? So I'm going to use up all that stuff. And more than likely, I'm about to go visit my neighbor, who's 92, and she loves company, as most older people do. And I know that my time is running out, and so I want to use all the paint on the palette so that I can wash the brush and then go over and have a visit with her, and then I can start later again in the evening, okay? So anyway, that's it for a little bit now, but keep watching the video, and I'll watch it too. And I'm doing a voiceover on this one because of the speeding up, but also I tend to listen to audiobooks while I paint because I like stories, and I should listen to music, and I used to listen to music because that puts you more in the abstract thinking. But I find that maybe it's because I'm alone a lot in my life that I like stories, but also there were a couple years ago I thought I would try to write a thriller book, a murder mystery set in Venice, Italy. Anyway, I started listening to audiobooks so that I could learn the structure of how you tell a story. But part of me also wonders, is there a way that I can tell a story visually in a painting that maybe the audiobooks would help? So you know what that is? That's a justification of something I really want to do, that I really enjoy doing. So what I did was I decided I'm going to paint with the audiobooks going on while I'm there, thinking about my stuff, and then maybe I can do this voiceover and see if I can explain what I'm doing instead of having to try to talk while I paint, because that's very difficult for me to do. Okay? So keep watching. We're going to develop this. I don't remember how many hours I painted this first time. Maybe it was 2 hours. I don't know. So anyway, but keep watching, and again, leave your questions. Thank you. Oh, I thought about something else that I can share here too. I told you that I recently finished a community mural for an old fountain, the wall behind an old fountain that's crumbling, and it was ugly, and they were having a festival, so we wanted to make it pretty. The white that I'm using is actually the very last part of the white that I had in a big jar of white. And to make it stretch for the mural project, and also because they were painting way faster than I expected, and I was a little bit overwhelmed by this, but I went and mixed some water with it, which I don't like to mix water with acrylics because you can, and it'll work sometimes, and it'll give you the effect, but I think of acrylic as being like plastic. And what I mean by that is, visually, you wouldn't add water to plastic because it just, I don't know. You can add water to acrylic, but I try not to add too much water because it weakens the chemical makeup of the acrylic, and I don't like to do that so much. But there are times where obviously you're rinsing out a brush, and if you want to do a wash, it kind of helps you to treat it like a watercolor kind of thing, but it's not. So you have to be careful with that. So you'll see that where I had put the white to develop the architecture, it's very translucent. Part of it's because I brushed it very thin because I want some of this purple to show through on some of this, on these places and things. especially later, as right now I'm starting to add some orange to it. But I just wanted to tell you that the white is very, very weak. And I'm going to have to go over that again, but I want to build it up again. So right now you can see I've mixed a little bit of orange in it. And the orange, I think, is going to pop out for one reason. It's a warmer color, whereas even though I'm using a warm lavender, and the blues are, you know, they're blue, but whatever. My point is that orange is kind of on the other side of the spectrum. So it's going to, one, break up all the blue, purple, green theme. And two, it's going to add some warmth to the painting. But also there's another side effect that happens when you do stuff like that, is that it being contrary to the subject of the painting, it's going to help put the focus back to the subject of the painting, which are the Morning Glories. Okay, so right now I'm just developing the architecture with the orange behind it. I know that in another layer I will be adding the bougainvillea plants, and I will be doing that. But I find that when I paint architecture and stuff, I almost like to have it, I like to do it in layers because I want the building to look right. And sometimes I find it's difficult to mix the exact same color in acrylic, at least for me, because I don't paint with acrylic all that often. But if I get a consistent look on the building, then I feel like it's a much better thing. Whereas if I have a little hole, oh, I forgot to paint the lower part of the balcony here, and I don't mix exactly the right color or something, there's that. So now you can see that I put in the roof color, and that's a darker color than what I have in orange. You know, if I put in a bright orange, it would be way too loud and it would take up too much space. What I did, because I wanted to have a sort of color cohesiveness in this painting, is I chose the darkest color on my palette, which is dark green, and I mixed it with the orange. It's opposite of orange, and I still want the hue to be on the warmer orange side, but I want to knock it down and I wanted to make it darker. And I suppose I could have chosen a burnt orange to mix this with because the tone is darker and it's still orange. But again, I'm trying to use as few colors as possible. And I'm not sure why I'm doing that, except that I usually know that every single work I've ever made, I try to learn something different and do something different. I've been trying to limit my palettes for a long time, but I also think that for a couple of years I've been trying to work with super exaggerated colors just to see if I can learn something about color, because I don't feel like color is my voice. But I'm having a really, really good time with what I've been doing for the last couple of years. But I also hear that little voice in the back of my head saying, yeah, but you're forgetting the beauty of black and white. You're forgetting the beauty of Eugène Carrière. You're forgetting the beauty of the monochrome, wishy-washy, you know, all of those things that I love, because I can tell you soft edges really make me feel depth and emotion. If everything has a sharp edge to it, it flattens it out for me, and I lose some interest in that. So again, you can see me bouncing around. I've done enough of the architecture, and sometimes I purposely don't finish a section because I want to sit with it for a little bit of time. So I want to be able to, I'm trying to get this painting developed before I finish for the day, so that as I rest or as I work on the computer or whatever, I'll look at it, I'll pass by it every once in a while when I'm going to different parts of my house. And sometimes things jump out at me, sometimes an idea comes up, you know. It's just like, you can't have ideas enter your head when you're taking the shower is the famous thing, but anytime you're doing anything fairly routine, that's when ideas will come to your brain. But you can't, I don't think you can have this happen if you're not asking yourself questions. And so I've learned that when I put these things sort of in front of me, I can be looking at it. There's a part of my brain that is asking a question, what can I do to make that better? Or is there a part that sticks out that I don't really want it to stick out? Is there something I like or I don't like? Is there something I can do? You know, so having these questions in my head, you see how I'm adding a lot more of the light color here, because I was afraid that I was getting a little bit too dark. And with that lavender field color, I'm starting with the mid-tone, so dark is going to be the way it tends to go. And to be honest, I love dark paintings. I love the high contrast. I love the drama of the light entering and piercing a scene. But there is a point, I think, in which my goal was to do something a lot more colorful and bright and happy and stuff like that. So anyway. Okay, so now I want to point out that you'll see me returning from the point of starting. And that is because I know that by now that those colors have dried. Because again, acrylic paint dries quite fast. And if you're doing a decent sized canvas, you can often come back to the place that you started and it'll be dry and you can be painting over it again. And I like that. I mean, sometimes I do like wet into wet because you can mix colors in a certain beautiful way. But a lot of times if I'm trying to develop shapes, I don't necessarily want to have that. So again, a lot of that is part of your own personal experimenting and seeing what works for you. And I don't always know what's going to work for me, to be honest. I try a lot of different things. You have to be open to the experimenting. You have to be listening to your gut. You have to say, and when I say listening to your gut, I mean, just remind yourself, this is not brain surgery. No one's going to die if you make a bad decision. No one's going to die if you make a bad mark. No one's even going to get hurt in the process, except maybe your ego. I don't know. I'm kidding about that, sort of. Maybe not. I don't know. But, you know, I mean, it's the thing that creativity does not happen when everything is open and wide. Like people, there was a kid that said that to me years ago, oh, you need to let your mind be free and then you can be, you don't have to make a figure out of that marble, you know, it could be anything. Well, yes, it could be anything, but, you know, this is kind of vulgar to say, but we used to have the saying when I was a kid of shit or get off the pot. It means, you know, make a decision. So at some point you've got to make a decision. Otherwise you can wishy-washy your whole way through and dream about all the opportunities that you have and never take any of them up. So, you know, and what's the worst that can happen? I make one decision on this painting, and then the next painting I come back in and I make a totally different decision and try something else. And then who knows, maybe I have two really amazing paintings, you know? And if I don't, then I have a painting that rocks my world in one way, and, you know, and I don't know. Some people tell me that it looks like all of my artworks are made from different minds because I work with too many different mediums, usually not together, but sometimes mix. Pastel with acrylic is one of my favorite ones too, but pastels with charcoal, you know, I like that too. But my point is, when I do marble carvings, that all of the works look different. Part of that is because of the medium. Because I've noticed that my acrylic paintings look very different from my oil paintings, and part of that is the way that they're made and how they're made and what their ingredients are and that sort of thing. So you know, a lot of times the oil paints are just completely different kind of hues and intensities than the acrylics are, and that's fine because that's part of the joy of why you would pick different mediums in the first place, you know. So those are all individual choices. And that is my neighbor's dog Yoda, who barks all night long because now I'm making this voiceover at midnight. So sorry about that, Yoda. Okay, so I have done this. This is, I say it's day one of the painting, but of course the first day I spent about maybe 30 minutes sketching the painting in the chalk that I mentioned before. And then this next day, I'm painting maybe in total 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know. Maybe this video is going to be 30 minutes, so that would mean maybe it's only an hour. Because I don't always get time to do everything that I want to do creatively. And like I said, I'm running the business stuff, and sometimes I do a volunteer service to drive people around, you know, can't drive, that kind of thing. But anyway, we all have different things in our lives that we're doing and different people that we're helping and taking care of. And so I try to get a little bit of stuff in here. So I've started the detail of the bougainvillea, and a lot, you know, again, it's all building. At some point now, as I look at this, I'm thinking, you know, when I did the Rio Maggiore painting last in June, I left a bright, dark, mid-tone pink, in the sky, and it ended up growing on me, and I left it there, and it was something I'd never done before, was having a color like that. I still have the traditional idea of, I like a movement of tone, and what that means is that right now my sky is a solid colored lavender. Oh, I love you, Yoda. And I know already that I'm not going to leave it solid like that. Now, I can see there are different blotches that I did from the strokes, because, do you know, have you thought about that if you make a stroke, a horizontal stroke with a bristle brush, paintbrush, it leaves little grooves of paint. You know, you're getting lines like you would in a wood shape kind of thing. And they reflect the light differently, because normally for a painting you're going to have a light that's overhead or maybe a little bit off to the side at an angle, and it's going to catch the light very differently on a horizontal brush stroke than it would a vertical brush stroke. So a lot of times I might even take a fan brush when I'm doing oil paints, especially if I don't want to have the light being caught by this horizontal or vertical stroke, but I wanted those different strokes in there to do different mixtures or broken color or something like that. I will soften all those so that you don't have this physical edge of the paint coming out at you that's going to catch the light and also cause a shadow under it, the same way that a shelf does. So sometimes I'll just take a brush, a very soft fan brush, and do vertical strokes to soften all of those things and keep the vertical stuff. Means that instead of having a light above you that catches the horizontal stroke, most light sources are going to be coming above or to the side, so they hit the vertical. You don't see it as much. They sort of fill in any of those kind of things. So anyway, what I mean is that I don't know yet whether I'm going to make the sky lighter, closer to the houses, and leave it dark purple. Probably that's what I'll do, because that's what the sky does. But I don't know. I'm debating about whether I might want to throw in some blues or pinks into that to reflect sort of the morning glory. I'm not sure yet where I'm going to go with this, and that's another reason I say process is very important, and some things kind of emerge as you're going along, and you kind of go with the flow of those ideas and let the painting sort of dictate what it wants to be itself. But again, every artist has their own way of working and thinking about this thing. So I'm going to be wrapping it up here soon, but I appreciate your comments and your questions and anything like that. Subscribe to my channel again if you like, and thank you. I really appreciate your time watching. It means a lot to me, and it helps me develop this time. Thank you to all my art patrons on patreon.com/Borsheimarts, because they make it possible for me to make these videos. All right. Thank you again. Ciao, ciao for now. Stay tuned.